What's up guys, it's Alex from Wrap Ohio. In today's video, we're going to be learning how to wrap a Fender. We're going to be using Vinyl Frog's Matte Metallic Hunter Green. This is going to be a completely comprehensive video, everything you need to know from preparation, installation, tips and tricks along the way, post-heating, and then overall wrap care. This is about 10 years of wrap experience bundled up into one video, so you know everything you need to know to start wrapping your car. Okay, to start out, we're going to go ahead and measure our panel. And we're gonna use about 2 inches front and back. That's typically what I do to have enough material to work with without being wasteful. So we have 2 inches in the front, about 2 inches in the back. That gives us 48 inches or 4 feet. And for the width, 30 inches. Now, knowing that the material is 5 feet in width by 60 feet long, if we can use 30 inches, which is half the width of the roll, we'll actually get 2 panels out of 1 cut. So that's going to be both fenders. If I cut 4 feet off the roll and then cut it in half, 30 inches and 30 inches, I'll get 2 fenders out of 1 pull of the roll. That's huge for material conservation. We want to cut as straight as possible so we don't waste material over the whole time. One of the main things to understand about vinyl is that it is directional. So as you see on the back of this liner, Vinyl Frog actually has a grid, which is extremely helpful in their logo. So we want to make sure that we keep the direction the same throughout the whole panel. What I do personally is I always make sure the logo is facing up or at a 45-degree angle. However, this would be up for me in my shop, this would be down. So we always put the panels facing upward. If the logo is facing up on the back side of the panel before we start, this way we assure that the finish will be consistent and uniform across the whole panel and around. If you switch up length and width, you'll actually see a difference in the hue, especially for nice metallic colors like this. Okay, so making sure I'm cutting with the length of the roll, I'm going to go ahead and turn my material and cut 30 inches. We're going to go ahead and use the grid pattern to make a perfectly straight cut so we don't end up short on either side. Okay, now we have our material cut down to size. So like we had said, we have 4 feet by 30 inches, which is half of the roll. So we were able to get 2 fenders out of 1 cut. As you see, we have the Vinyl Frog logo on the back. This is going to help us maintain direction to give a uniform finish across the whole car. Okay, before we install the vinyl, we're going to make sure to prep this panel again to make sure it's perfectly ready for installation. Now, here's the preparation process. Anytime you go to do a wrap, you get the vehicle in, you do a complete car wash. I don't think I have to do a video on washing the car. This should be pretty self-explanatory. Make sure to wash in detail the car before you even begin. Then, before you do the panel itself, you're going to want to use a clay bar and a water alcohol mix to get any tar, bugs, or just any other road grime that could be on it that will show under the vinyl. At the end of the day, we want the smoothest finish possible and we want it to look like paint. In order to do so, preparation is key. So we're going to start with a clay bar. This is literally basically clay, and this could be found at a Walmart or any automotive store. It is a clay bar, and this is used to get bugs and tar off. So we have a water, soap, and alcohol mix here. This is going to give it some slip, and the alcohol is going to allow it to break down any of those contaminants. Just give it a wipe down originally just to get any dust that had gotten on the car just by sitting, and then we spray again and make up and down movements. So this is going to get any bugs or tar or sap off of the car that would otherwise show underneath the wrap. A crosshatch pattern can be used to make sure we don't miss any spots. Give it a thorough wipe down when we're done. Now we're going to do what I call fine tuning, and we're going to clean all of the edges where the vinyl is going to stick and make its final bond to. This is extremely important and cannot be skipped. You start with a tucker, which came from Vinyl Frog. You can order it on their website. I'll show you the tools I'm going to be using right before we install. So take the tucker, put it around a rag, spray it with 70% isopropyl alcohol, and then get in each crack. Very good. Make sure there's no dirt, and periodically move to a new part of the rag. For fenders like this, go ahead and open the door so you can get the back edge. Spray more 70% isopropyl alcohol and get this back edge really good. Again, make sure you're using a different part of the rag periodically so you're not spreading dirt from one side to another. Here's another edge where we're going to be tucking. We want to make sure it's super clean. Now another really important spot is up here in this wheel well. On cars, especially cars that are not new, there's going to be tire shine, wax, dirt, rocks, and everything in between stuck to this wheel well. It's extremely important to clean it thoroughly. I'm going to use a new part of the rag and get it again. This is where your vinyl is going to stick, so it's incredibly important to clean it properly or else you can expect a failure over time. Before we start, let's go ahead and take a look at the tools we're going to need to do the job. I just got this in from Vinyl Frog. All right, we have our wrap gloves. Now these go on your hands in times where the squeegee won't quite fit and you need to use your hand to get a smooth, slick surface across the vinyl. These are great. We have our tool pouch. This is used so we keep our tools on us and we don't lose them as we work around the car. This is called a snitty. We use this to trim areas like the wheel well, which you'll see momentarily, without cutting through or having the risk of cutting through. We also have a heat gun. This is extremely important to soften the film as we work it and shrink our edges before we cut. Your knife. This is also important with the correct blade. This is a 30-degree breakaway blade. It's absolutely critical to have the proper tools, including the blade, to do a good job. Squeegees. We have our Vinyl Frog squeegee. This is great because it has a soft buffer that won't scratch the material as you put it on. There's different types of squeegees with different firmness for each one. So sometimes you want a firmer squeegee to get that wrinkle out, other times you want a softer one as you feed a recess. Now, in case you don't get all the bubbles out and you see one at the very end that just won't release on its own, you can use an air release pen. You prick the smallest little hole and feed it from one side to the other as the air releases. And for the most important tools, your tuck tools. These are absolutely critical. This is called a sunny tucker and it helps to get around the edges and is used in those hard to reach areas. Absolutely critical and necessary for any job. We have our tuckers. These are used where panels meet. So this is where your fender meets your bumper or where your rear bumper meets your quarter panel or under a belt molding, areas like that. Just like the squeegees, there's different levels of firmness based on what you might require. This metal tool is nice, it's firm, and that is critical sometimes where a plastic tool won't quite reach. A thin metal tool with the rigidity of metal will pull the vinyl up when you need to. Last but not least, we have our magnets. These are really nice when you don't have a second pair of hands or you just want the vinyl to be held up without scratching it while you take the liner off or make a trim. Okay, so a couple more tips before we lay the material. Make sure to clean the material thoroughly, both on the back, which is called the liner, as well as the front of it. Okay, so before we lay this panel, I have two more quick tips for you to keep dust and debris down and out from underneath your roll, making a better finish in the end. So take a rag that's roughly damp a little bit and wipe the material both on the front very thoroughly as well as the back or on the liner. This is because when you take the liner off, it creates a lot of static electricity that can pull up dust and debris from the surrounding area. That leads me to my next point. In order to keep dust down, we can use a soap and water mix or just a straight water mix to spray the whole surrounding area. This keeps the dust down. Now I do have tire covers ordered from Vinyl Frog. However, I didn't order them in time, so they're not here. So if you don't have tire covers, tire being a spot with a ton of debris on it, then you go ahead and use the water mix. Don't spray alcohol on the tire. It will yellow out or kind of burn the rubber. So this is soap and water or just water. Spray the area around really good. This way, again, when you take the liner off, it doesn't pull dust and debris. You can actually spray the whole surrounding area, but for this video, I won't do that. Okay, so now we're going to put the material up on the car. We're going to trim the wheel well out just so we don't have excess material. We're paying attention to our direction. So like I said before, I like the Vinyl Frog logo to be up. It's currently facing down. So I'm going to rotate the material until the logo would be facing up when I put it against the vehicle. This makes sure it's a uniform, consistent finish across the whole car. Okay, so some vehicles are not magnetic. As you see on this one, it's all aluminum. So in that case, we just use our traditional tape. I'm lightly pressing against with my leg. Not too crazy, I don't want to scratch the film. We'll tape to the headlight here. And then I'll tape over here on the front door. Okay, so we make sure we have enough up top. We have enough on the bottom. Do we have our 2 inches in the front? We make sure we have enough on the top. We make sure we have enough on the bottom, our 2 inches on the back, and our 2 inches up front. This is perfect placement. So now I'll take my snitty and we'll go ahead and trim off the excess material in the wheel well, just to make it easier to work with. You can see the snitty is really nice because I don't have to worry about cutting the tire or the wheel, but I can get an accurate cut. Now, when it comes to taking the liner off material, I always personally start with the bigger side first. It's a lot easier to take the liner from here to here, as opposed to taking the liner from the front and then trying to get it when you're pulling it. It's a lot easier to go from the big side to the small side. So I'm gonna start, while that's still taped, I'm gonna undo the liner a few inches. I'm going to tack the material right back where it was. Now, I'd recommend tacking the material outside of the installation zone. The installation zone being the panel that I'm wrapping. The reason for this is because as you work the material and pull it, you don't want to make any adhesive lines or stretch marks or any indicators that you had manipulated the film. So I'm tacking this material on the hood and on the door. I'm going to reinforce that just to be safe with either a magnet or a piece of tape. Now I come to this side and I lift the material. I reach under and now I slowly pull the liner off. Now I can just continue to pull, and in this case it would be fine. However, it's also a good spot to now I could just pull the liner all the way off, but I also have the opportunity to tack on the door just to keep it from rotating. Okay, so now I'll go ahead and pull the remainder of the liner. This is slowly, and I'm watching for what's called zippers. Okay, so without pulling this into the tire. Now, a zipper is when the liner itself creases and then creases the film. This can be heated out, but if avoided, it's even better. Okay, we'll go ahead and finish. Now that the liner is off the material, I'm going to adjust the position. I'm going to go ahead and get this area positioned first, and then I'll work my way this way. So one of the critical steps with vinyl wrap installation is pulling the right way. So we pull triangles. So if this is the area that I'm focused on, I'm going to pull a triangle downward in order to smooth the wrinkles out before they would even occur. So I popped it up. Now I'm going to pull my triangle down, and I'm going to tack it preferably outside the installation zone. Now I'll do the same thing for this corner here. I'll pull a triangle up and out. Okay, triangle up and out. And we'll go ahead and lock this area into position. Okay. Okay, so now that we have the material tacked into place and we like our positioning, we're gonna go ahead and pick this front portion up. We're gonna heat just a little bit just to soften the material, get any wrinkles that were made as I pulled the liner off. And if you have more of a compound fender, you'll give it a little heat and you'll pull a triangle towards the front. Now with this type of material, it's best to just make one steady and sturdy pull. Like that. Okay, now that we're past any wrinkles, we're gonna go ahead and lightly heat the material just to soften it up a little bit. Okay, let the material cool. This is very important. You don't want a hard line here that you then stretched from, because this is all gonna be super stretched and this part will not be stretched. You'll see that in the material. So it's critical to let the material cool. We just heated it to smoothen out the finish, make sure there was no wrinkles in there. Okay, so I will be pulling a triangle frontward. As I pull front, I'm gonna pull down and up at the same time to distribute the stretch and to get the wrinkles out. Tack outside of the installation zone on the bumper and the headlight. I'm gonna tack here as well on the hood, and I'm gonna pull the bottom back up and get this area pulled down or glassed out. One steady pull. Oh, one more. There we go. And I pulled a triangle down. Now we'll begin the squeegee process. I will now begin to squeegee this material out, working the air and the wrinkles as we go. So you can see a big air bubble developing here. That's okay. We can either take it from the bottom or in this case, from the top. Okay, so with one hand, I'm actually gonna pull upward. And that's good because we had already pulled this way, so pulling upward evens out the stretch and makes it easier to squeegee the material. With wrinkles like this, you want to make sure you hit it from the correct direction. So we're going to come back from this way. If I squeegee this way, it's actually going to reinforce those. But if I come from here while pulling up with this hand is a counter pull, it lays right down. Same thing with this wrinkle here. If I hit it this way, it's going to reinforce it. However, if I come from this direction, it lays right down. Okay, now we're going to squeegee this portion down. Wrinkle bubbles like this do happen. However, due to Vinyl Frog's nice material, they come right out. And if they don't, you could either use that air tool at the end or just pop your area up if you still have the excess film. No point in pulling that up if we don't have to. Something like this, it's pretty simple. We'll pop from the side. Oh, that's okay. If that happens, We squeegee down. This is a good opportunity for me to explain the U-shaped squeegee pattern, guys, okay? So we're gonna squeegee a U, and that's gonna help distribute the wrinkles evenly and any potential stretch evenly as we go. So I will begin to squeegee a U shape into this as we get towards the edge. Now we'll finish squeegeeing the air forward before we begin the finishing process. I'm going to kind of go over the area that I had already squeegeed just to make sure I'm not leaving any areas unsqueegeed in the middle. Here we come up on a couple bubbles. These are fine. Just give it a little tap, a little massage. And if it's tight, give it a little bit, let off, give it a little bit, let off, and then it'll go away. Now you could also pick it up from the front, but that could cause adhesive lines. It could let dust in. So if we're able to release them with the air release technology that Vinyl Frog has, then we will. Okay, as we enter this wheel well area, I'm going to pop this up and pull down. Because we had our original stretch going this way, all we have to do now is pull down to even it out and for it to lay right down. Okay, now we begin the finishing process. The most important thing to understand about vinyl is that it does have a memory. So when you stretch it, it's going to want to retract back. Now what triggers the memory? It's heat. So have you ever heard of people saying, oh, it failed in the sun? Well, yeah, it was overstretched during the installation process. The sun, or the heat, came out. The vinyl retracted back to 0%, which is where it started from. So in order to avoid that and to get a wrap to last 5 years no problem, with nothing pulling back, we have to heat our edges and shrink them back to 0% before we tuck and cut. Okay, so now before we finish, we're going to go ahead and we're going to shrink all of our edges back. Now I just switched heat guns out, and I gotta say, I actually like this Vinyl Frog one a lot because it has a gauge here that allows you to change your heat. So that's great. So I'm gonna go to about 3/4 in at about 5, setting 5. And to the higher setting, oh yeah. And now you'll see the material actually shrinking back to 0%. Now, for areas like this, the technique that I use and that I drill into my guys is pop, shrink, tuck, cut. Pop it, shrink it, tuck it, cut it. Those 4 steps are critical. So step 1, pop it. Why are we popping it? Because it only shrinks so much when it's anchored to the bumper. So we need to pop it so it's not hung up on anything before we shrink it back so we can tuck it and then cut it, knowing that it's been shrank back and that it's going to have a solid bond. So carefully pop it. I'm going to cut off a little excess here. You can also lay tape on the bumper itself to lower the surface energy and make it a little bit easier to pop. So pop. Okay. Now that it's been popped, we're going to shrink it. So once the material stops responding, we know that it's been shrank. Okay, now that we've shrank the material, we're gonna go ahead and tuck it in. Now with tucking and finishing, corners always go first. You have 3 corners on this little body, this little area here. You have this corner, and this corner. I'm actually gonna start on this body line because otherwise we could run a wrinkle to it and then have a little wrinkle here. So we're gonna start here as we tuck. Okay, now we're gonna work out. I'm going to go back to this corner now. I'm going to pop it up. We already have shrank it. I'm going to begin to push this corner in and now I'll lose this little middle area I've created. Okay. And work my way up towards the light. I'm going to stop before I get there, and I will explain why. So as we go to finish this area here, if I wanted to finish this corner, it would be hung up on this light. So I'm going to make what's called a bridge cut before I finish this. Now again, we're going to make sure it's shrank. And it is. Now I'm going to make what's called a bridge cut. I'm going to take my knife and very carefully run it on the edge of the headlight. Now this is a black car, so it's fine. It's going to get enough material back in there to where you don't see the paint, and it's going to be a clean straight line. So I have my middle finger I'm using as a depth guide, and I'm only letting the blade go in so much because my middle finger is stopping it. That, and I'm not turning the blade into the headlight, digging in. I'm basically running just flush and actually a hair off flush. So I am pushing with my thumb against the headlight to keep my blade in position, and I'm using my middle finger as a depth guide. Now I'll make my bridge cut. I'm going to pull away the excess. Now I'm going to shrink this again before I finish. I had already shrank it once, but it was anchored to the light. I'm going to shrink it again so it can finish getting back to 0%. I had probably shrank back to about 5% stretch. I want to get it back to 0%. That way I can know that this is never going to pull back because we originally stretched it this way. Okay. Okay. I'm going to pop this up again. I'm going to give it one more shrink for good measure. Now, with this corner being my first, I'm going to take this material while it's still a little bit warm, and I'm going to push at the very peak of the corner itself. I'm going to wrap it around and push on the back peak. The very center of the corner on the back is where I'm pushing. Now I'm popping the material up off the bumper so it doesn't just stretch in. I don't want it to be anchored on the bumper as I tuck it, or else I'm going to be stretching it at the very end. So while popping up, I'm going to start at that corner, and I'm going to roll this way. Popping it, rolling this way. Okay. Popping again. I'm going to lose the wrinkles that are left in the middle. We had already done our lower and lowest corner. Now we're losing this last bit in the middle. You can see I keep popping it off the bumper. Why am I doing this? So it allows it to actually get tucked in without being stretched in the process. Okay, so I was basically able to finish this corner, but before I did this corner, I had to make my bridge cut to allow the material to be worked around. The same is true for this wheel well corner. I can't do this corner until this cut is made. That cut will be made when I finish making this cut, okay? And this is all in the name of not overstretching the material. I could wrap this corner around, but in doing so, I'm going to overstretch the material, causing it to shrink back with its memory in the sun. So we don't want that. We want long-term wraps. So I'm going to stick my knife in here, and I'm going to very carefully run it between the fender and the bumper. Now at this point, I'm going to angle this way so I have enough excess when I go to finish that corner. Pull it off. I'm going to take my heat gun. And make sure that any little stretch that was done in that process is out. Now I'm going to take my tucker, now that it's been heated and shrank again. I'm going to make sure it's all down. Any spots that needed trimmed could be trimmed, but this way we have full coverage. I don't see any paint. I know the material has been tucked and shrank before it was cut, and I can have confidence that this will not pull up. Okay, so before I work this whole fender well, which I could work from here to here, but at this point, I'm gonna run into the same problem we had here. So this cut must be made before I can work this corner. So in order to do so, I'm going to pop it, shrink it, tuck it, cut it. One of the top 3 most important things to know about vinyl wrap. And it's all in the name of not overstretching the material, so it lasts for a long time. Okay, now that it's popped up off this rocker panel and there's nothing holding it and restricting it from shrinking, I will shrink it. And when the material stops reacting, we know that it's back to 0% and it has its full adhesive coat weight and it'll be durable as it should. So again, corners first. You have 3 corners. Once again, we have corner 1, corner 2, and we have this body line corner. I'm gonna start at the body line corner. This is what I do so there's not a wrinkle. By starting at this corner and this corner, you're gonna run a wrinkle right to this body line. There's gonna be a little wrinkle nib that you're gonna see. It'll be an eye catcher. So that corner first. Now I'll actually work my way over to here. I'm gonna run this corner the same way. I'm gonna wrap it around. Okay. Now it's not all the way wrapped around because I need to make this cut before I can really work it around. So I'm gonna get this tucked so I can cut it. When I cut it, I'll be able to work this corner up and around, and then I'll also be able to get this corner. But I can't do this corner or this corner until this cut's made. Now that it's pulled off, we're gonna shrink it one more time. I'm gonna go ahead and shrink the whole wheel well as well. Any air that you missed along the way will be shown to you, which is a good thing. Okay, while it's nice and warm, I'm gonna work around this corner here, give it a little bit of a pull and hook. Before I move on, I'm gonna go ahead and finish making sure this is all tucked and down now that it's been heated and shrank. Now I have this corner hooked. I do not have this corner hooked, so I'm gonna warm it up just for pliability. You can see the material didn't really react. That's because it had already been shrank. Now while it's warm, we're gonna hook to the very peak of the corner. So I'm gonna pull it just a little bit, and I'm gonna push down on the peak of the corner. Then you start at the peak of the corner and work your way around. Start at the peak of the corner and work your way around. Now I will go ahead to connect my center because I started at my corners and I had already done them. Now there's a little bit of tension here, so I'm gonna go ahead and feel the panel. The panel is about this thick, so what I can do is make some relief cuts, leaving enough room here to hit the back edge of the panel, but these cuts will enable the film to shrink and work its way back around. 1, shrink all the way when I cut it, but 2, work its way back around when I try to hit the back edge of the panel. So now I will shrink it one more time and you'll see there was still a little bit of stretch in there. Okay, so I'm gonna work it around until I can feel with my finger the vinyl on the back edge of the panel itself. We're gonna make sure there's no wrinkles along the way, so I'm just doing a little bit at a time. Okay, now that we're back, now that we're all the way around to the back edge, I'm gonna start at the corner. Now I'm actually gonna ride on the back edge of the panel. I'm actually cutting flush on the back side here. We will heat one more time to make sure nothing was missed. And if nothing moves, that's a good thing. Now we'll move on to the next edge. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and move on to this edge here between the fender and the front door. I'm gonna start with a pre-shrink, and you'll see the material actually reacting to this first set of heat. It'll actually wrinkle and then smooth out, and that's when you know it's done. You don't wanna overheat either. And that's it. Once it's smooth, we're gonna go ahead and reinforce our edge, and then we're gonna make another bridge cut similar to the one we made on the headlight. Making sure our blade is fresh. Once again, I'm gonna use my middle finger as a depth gauge. And then I'm gonna use my thumb to push against this opposite panel here on the door. This way I keep my blade where it's supposed to be, but I don't go too deep at the same time. This is a bridge cut. Now we'll pull off the excess. Now we can go ahead and open up the door. And in doing so, I'll be able to shrink it the rest of the way. Now, similar to on the front bumper, we had to make the relief cut on the headlight to get worked around. And on this wheel well, we had to cut the lower area to work it around. I have to actually pop the hood before I can work this area. I can't work this corner around while this is caught up. So I'm going to detach it from the hood. I'm also going to pop the hood. Now that the hood's popped, we can go ahead and work it around properly and get a full shrink. You can see there was a little bit of shrink left in there. Once we're confident, all of the stretch has been shrank out, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna start with this corner up here. I wanna give you a little bit of a closer look here. I'm gonna shrink one more time just to be sure. Yep, did not react, so that means we're done. We're going to heat to increase pliability. Now I'm going to work with my corner. I'm going to wrap it around the very peak of the corner first. And Now once this is wrapped around this corner, I will now work down and around the body line. Now when we do this, we want to make sure that we're not rolling all the way around at once. We're going to take multiple passes, going a little bit on each one until we're fully around. Now for sections like this, it's actually nice. This is where the wrap gloves will come into play. This is where it's nice to have a smooth, it's almost like turning your hand to a squeegee. So as normal, we're gonna shrink first. It's already been popped. Shrink. I had already come through once, so it's fully shrank. We've now confirmed that. And now with the wrap glove, we'll get to our edge. Now on this Fender, because it's black and the hood covers all of this, we're actually only gonna go to this body line, so I will be trimming it back to that body line, so it's just the perfect height there. We did cut it close on the width, but we did that, if you remember, to make 30 inches work. It was critical to make 30 inches work because we got both fenders out of one pull on the roll, meaning we'll have more than enough material, which is good in case a mistake is made. So we're gonna finish our last corner before we roll all this. I'm gonna go ahead and heat it up for pliability. We're gonna start at this corner here and work our way up. So start at the corner and then roll off. Start at the corner and roll off. We're gonna trim the excess material. Heat for good measure. And then we'll tuck it to its final resting place. Now that this corner is finished, we're gonna heat one more time. And we had already heated it and shrank it, so that's good. We're gonna run our hand on the edge of the body line to make sure no wrinkles are there. We'll use the back end of our squeegee. And then we'll do our final tuck with the tucker. And it's done. So now we're gonna score back to this body line here. We're gonna make sure we have a fresh blade. Okay, so with a sharp blade, we're gonna be able to score back to this body line without cutting through. I'll demonstrate scoring after. However, if you don't have knifeless tape, you go ahead and score it, and with just the right amount of pressure, it doesn't cut through. Now for scoring, again, a fresh blade is absolutely necessary. I'd recommend trying this on different body panels of a scrap car or a car that you can fail on. However, once you master the technique, just the right amount of pressure will score the material without cutting through. So the last step is post-heating. We want to turn our setting up to about 5 and get the material up to 200 degrees. This is going to kill any memory it has left that's going to want to pull back, and it ensures long-term durability for years to come. Now we want to go awkwardly slow so it does its job. However, we don't want to overheat and create a gloss area. With matte and satin films, we can gloss the edge. So if you have a laser thermometer, it's a good thing to double check, but once we hit 200 degrees, we can rest assured our material has been post-heated. All right, guys, so that concludes the fender. Just to do a quick recap, we had the preparation. That's the wash of the entire vehicle. Then we have our clay bar with the isopropyl alcohol and soap mix. And then we have a 70% isopropyl alcohol fine tuning where we take the tucker and the rag, get all of the edges. We have installation, tips and tricks. We made sure we shrank all of our edges back. We learned pop it, shrink it, tuck it, cut it. Critical for areas like this. We learned scoring, and then we learned post heating. That's it, guys. We'll see you on the next video. I'm gonna move on to the rear door in case you wanna check out how to do that and how to deal with recesses like this. If you need any of the materials used, you could check the link in the bio, but vinylfrog.com is where you can shop. Take care.